Today's pretty crappy, but we're going to be comparing the Pixel 3 versus the Mate 20.
Now the biggest difference with the front-facing camera is the megapixels. The Mate has 24, while the Google only has 8.
Now the Google Pixel has two camera lenses in the front. There's a normal lens and there's a wide lens.
It's really nice to have, especially when you want a wider shot with your friends.
This is how the wide angle looks like from the Pixel 3, of course, and the only lens off of the Mate 20.
Now for video, it's the standard 1080p at 30.
So this is the front-facing low-light video test.
Of course, I can't tell right away which one is better, but that's for you to judge.
So this is another example of the wide selfie mode on the Pixel 3 versus the Mate 20 with the front-facing camera. So it is a difference. I'm not too sure if there's a big
Quality difference with the wide angle lens.
You guys can judge that for yourself too.
Let's move on to the back camera and let's see which one takes better pictures and videos.
Alright, jumping right into the front-facing portrait mode, hands down, Pixel wins. The highlights really destroys the background with the portrait mode on the Mate 20, and it feels really artificial. These phones process the pictures after you take them, and I feel like Huawei does a harsh job doing so, and looking at the clouds, it really feels over sharpened and flat versus the Google Pixel where it looks more softer. And overall, from all these pictures I've seen, Huawei tends to lean more on the contrast layer side, while the Pixel tends to be lighter on the contrast. So the darks are much more black than the Pixel, but that's a self-preference thing. That's really depending on how you like your photos. In terms of texture, I feel like the Huawei does a bit better job showing the shadows, meaning that the texture does pop a little bit more than the Pixel pictures. So the Pixel has one good thing that I do like is the top shot, where if you do miss the moment, you can grab it back, but then again, it's not the best quality. Huawei has the ultra wide angle mode, which I do love using all the time. It looks super great, and it also has a macro as well using the ultra wide lens. Now taking aperture / portrait mode with objects and structures, I do find that the Mate 20 does a bit better job finding that structure and blurring the background out. When you're moving closer to your subject, the Pixel does register what you're trying to take, and I do find that the Pixel does have cleaner edges when deciding the background blur from the subject. Now for low light in the city, where there's a lot of city lights, I can barely tell which one is better. From what I can see, I think the colors on the Pixel 3 does pop out a little bit better than the Huawei Mate 20. Now when it gets really dark out with barely any light source, I find that the Huawei Mate 20 does a better job. As you can tell from the sky, there's a lot more noise and artifacts on the Pixel. The Huawei Mate 20 looks pretty clean. With portrait mode, the Pixel does zoom in quite a bit. For the Huawei, it does go for that 2x zoom at first, but you can always zoom out to get that wider portrait shot. I do like how the Mate 20 has a more compressed background that looks more like a telephoto lens, but I do think the Pixel does have a better blur for my taste. So for video, 1080p walking test, I do find that the Huawei Mate 20 does have a bit more wobble. It's really small, but if you pay attention to the Mate 20 footage, you can tell that it wobbles more often than the Pixel 3. And the Pixel does have a slightly cooler tone, whereas the Mate 20 has a bit of a greenish yellow tone. So for 4K 30, sadly they can only do 4K 30. The stabilization is really good on both phones. I do find that the Mate 20 has a bit of a bounce than the Pixel 3. And like I said earlier, that the Pixel 3 is cooler and the Mate 20 is a bit more greenish yellow. Here you can tell the big difference. In terms of what colors I can see with my own eyes, the Mate 20 does represent that much closer than the Pixel 3. The dynamic range on the Pixel 3 does look a little bit better than the Mate 20, as well as the flaring. I do think is more controlled on the Pixel 3's lens, and the contrast on the Mate 20 is a little bit more harsher, where you can tell that the clouds shadows do stick out more, so they seem like they have more texture in them. Walking test in 1080p low light, Pixel do win in this case. There's a lot more jitter going on, so it's a bit more blurry on the Mate 20 versus the Pixel 3. Moving on to 4K walking test, the Pixel 3 wins again. You still get that jitter movement every time you take a step, so it's pretty blurry most of the time. So the Pixel 3's image does seem like it has a really slight green tint to it, whereas the Mate 20 does seem more balanced and look more normal. But I do think the colors on the Pixel 3 does pop a little bit more, given that the red of the buildings and the greens does come off a little bit better than the Mate 20. So overall, they both can do really good pictures. The Mate 20 has more flexibility and more options because of the wide angle lens, so I do think it's better for the creative person, whereas the Pixel is someone who just wants something simple, takes out the phone, snap, and it looks good. And for me, the Pixel 3 does win for video. So that is my comparison between the Mate 20 and the Pixel 3. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.